When I said before that there are people who believe that this period from 1960 to 1963 is a kind of a golden period. Those people usually argue for the genius of Phil Spector as a producer and what he was able to do with creating these big kinds of sounds in the recording studio that were bigger than anything you could get live. They used the recording studio as its own kind of instrument, and they see that as a fantastic move forward for the business. Now, it wouldn't be fair to say that gets cut short by the British invasion, because if anything, when Brian Wilson and the Beatles start to get a hold of the recording studio and have the ability to start trying to do some of the kinds of things they want to be able to do, if anything, they build on Phil Spector's work and become sort of students and followers of Phil Spector in sort of using the recording studio as an instrument. But another style that people will often say got cut short by the arrival of the British invasion is the style called sweet soul. And the argument usually runs that you had something that was going on that was great there. It was a form of African American music that was crossing over big time onto the pop charts. It had a lot of subtlety, it had a lot of sophistication, and in come these British guys with the matching haircuts and the matching suits and the accents and the guitars banging around with She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand, and it was just much cruder than what some of these sweet soul artists were doing. Well, you decide for yourself what you think about that, but what I want to do is just give you an idea of what was going on with sweet soul and how that whole style fits together. The roots of sweet soul probably go back to people like Nat King Cole and Johnny Mathis. That is, kind of crooner type black singers who were singing songs that were more sort of adult, romantic kind of tunes than teen kinds of songs. So good examples of that might be Nat King Cole's track from 1958 called Looking Back, or Johnny Mathis from 1957 singing Chances Are, or Misty from 1959. Beautiful ballads, very much in the old kind of, probably very much more in the old kind of sort of Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin song stylist tradition, but without the big band. Instead, maybe with more of a kind of orchestral backing. We also want to look at somebody like Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke's an interesting guy because his roots were in gospel music, and he's a good example of somebody who moved from gospel to pop, but felt very conflicted about it, and it was kind of a controversial thing for him to do. For a lot of the reasons last week we talked about Little Richard, gospel being God's music, and rock and roll or pop being the devil's music that draws people away from the church and into saloons and bars and this kind of thing. But he did make the transition away from gospel. And in 1957 had a #1 hit with You Send Me, continued to have hits into the early 1960s. Another Saturday Night was a #9 hit for him in 1963. But he died tragically was murdered, in fact, in 1964 in a motel, some kind of a dispute over a woman or some kind of thing like that. Never been entirely clear to me. There was a lot of shrouded in a little bit of mystery for a while there, but whatever, he died too young, but was a fantastic voice that really was one of the sort of pioneers in this sweet soul sound. But the sweet soul sound really starts to come together as a genre when Leiber and Stoller get a hold of it and start to blend R&B music with classical strings and Latin rhythms. The first one of these, I promised in the last video that we would talk about, is There Goes My Baby, a #2 hit in 1959. You know, when There Goes My Baby was finished, and Leiber and Stoller brought it to Jerry Wexler, who at that time was running the show at Atlantic Records, or well, running a lot of the show at Atlantic Records at the time. Wexler didn't think they should release it because it had these R&B things going on in it that sounded very sort of doo-wop, and then it had these classical things, not only just classical strings, but little sort of melodic figures in the center of it that sound like they could be coming from late 19th century Russian nationalist music by somebody like Mussorgsky or Borodan or Tchaikovsky or somebody like that. And he thought, you know, he thought it was such a blend of two different styles that nobody would like it. The classical fans wouldn't like it, and the R&B fans wouldn't like it. And so his famous remark was, as far as he was concerned, There Goes My Baby sounded like a radio that was stuck between two channels, a classical channel and an R&B channel. He didn't like it at all. But Leiber and Stoller said, listen, you know, this is the song, release it. And they were right. It was a #2 hit and a big hit not only for the Drifters, but also sort of launched the career of Benny King, who was a lead singer in the group at that time. You can probably, over the course of the time that we're studying the history of rock, we're going to see a growing of musical ambition. We're going to see musicians increasingly wanting to do more ambitious things with the music, make it into better music, maybe become less and less satisfied with the idea that pop is disposable music, that they want to create something more of lasting value. And you could start to see the beginnings of this ambition in There Goes My Baby. And we'll follow the story forward over the next several weeks as we talk about the development of rock and roll through the 60s and then in part 2 into the 70s and 80s. I mentioned before Benny King. Benny King sang with the Drifters for a little while longer after There Goes My Baby, but then he split off to be a solo act and was replaced by a fellow named Rudy Lewis with the Drifters. So there were really 2 acts that Leiber and Stoller were working with. They were working with Benny King as a solo act and the Drifters as a group act. With Benny King, they had hits with Spanish Harlem, which was a #10 hit in 1961, and Stand By Me, a #4 hit in 1961. Both of those having a little bit of that kind of Latin vibe. So it's kind of R&B meets Latin music, meets sort of classical strings. The Drifters, Up on the Roof from 1962, a #5 hit on the pop charts. On Broadway from 1963, a #9 hit on the pop charts. And that again with Rudy Lewis singing lead. So as I said before, if you're an advocate of this period, it's probably because you think this style of sweet soul was such a fantastic blending of R&B with a kind of classical sophistication with some Latin elements. It was sort of sophisticated, understated perhaps, but very expressive. So you decide for yourself what you think about that. In the meantime, let's move on to TV, the movies, and dance crazes during this period.